When did Concu start and what is your story?
We started extremely small, no big plans. We didn't have like Excel sheets and projections and graphs, none of it. Including the ground and the mezzanine, it was about 800 SFT. We didn't hire a maid or any support staff as well. So we
Transition into something really small to something really big. What was a challenge that you've come across?
Interestingly, when you said transition from small to something big and meaningful, I think for us it was just transitioning into something meaningful or more meaningful. Every step we took were baby steps, like, okay, this we've sort of perfected.
When you're managing a brand like this, branding element is very important.
Your value has to reflect in the brand. People recognize Conçu with their heart. The logo that was built, the font for the Conçu, the colors, everything was a part of that branding exercise.
So I want to talk about the cafe culture in Hyderabad.
2012, you could count on your fingers. There was like Coffee Day, there was Barista, there was just a handful of other places, and none of them served great coffee. Coffee tasted terrible and you had to add so much sugar to make it just palatable. Now I think there's just dozens and dozens of good places where you can get great coffee.
Let's say like the 30 cafes in Banjara Hills, Jubilee Hills, will everybody have enough business? That's a question that pops up in my mind.
We see a lot of places opening, but at the same time there are a lot of places that shut. I see some places they just go all out and spend so much money on it, but you need to have that experience, you need to have that product. If not done all that groundwork, it's hard to sustain.
What do you do in your free time?
There is no free time that will come to you on a platter. You have to make that time for yourself, right? In the last year, I just randomly woke up one day and I'm like, hey, I'm going to make this 40 before 40 list for myself.
You have 40 items on your list.
I finished about 32 of those.
What would your advice who wants to start and make it big in the F&B industry?
Trust your gut. It will tell you what is the right thing to do. Sometimes things don't work and you should know when to close that door, cut it off. If this is not meant for you, something else will be, right? Don't give up.
Hi, welcome to another episode. We have a fantastic guest with us today who is Swati, who's the founder of Concu, which is our favorite cafe to hang out in Hyderabad. Welcome to another episode, Swati. We've been waiting for you for a really long time, and I've been actually looking forward to having a conversation with you for a while.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. So, before I can give an introduction, can you help people understand what is your story? I know it's a very heavy question to start off with, but in a very brief manner, if you can tell us when did Concu start and what was Swati before Concu and how is Concu going?
Again, that's a very
long question.
Yes,
Yes,
to this question. But so briefly, I'll just tell you that Conçu started in 2012. So exactly 12 years back. My husband, he's a pastry chef, and we were in the UK for about 4 years. And then he said, why don't we go back to Hyderabad and test the market, see what's happening. Start small. If it is something that we enjoy doing, and if the business grows, then we'll stay back. Otherwise, we'll look for something else or come back and look for a job in the UK, or there was no real plan as such, and we'll just go with the flow. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
So we moved back after 4 years of being in the UK. We moved back in 2012, started extremely small. Sahil, I never intended to be in the business, which I would have said in every interview, every podcast, everywhere, that I never intended to be in this, but it was just
God's plan.
Yeah, it was God's plan, I guess, and no complaints at all. I just was hanging around trying to help him because he was doing everything on his own. And it's just slowly, I think, the amount of time I started spending with him trying to manage the business or help it grow, from like a few hours every day, it became like full-time, more than full-time. We were like working about 16 hours a day. And then I just realized, I enjoy doing this every day. Why can't I just continue doing this? I don't have to be pressured to say I at some point wanted another career and I should just go and chase that. If I'm enjoying doing this, why try and do something else? So I just stuck around, and it wasn't really a conscious decision also. It was just living every day as it comes, enjoying it. And then 12 years have passed and there have never been any second thoughts on this. So.
Interesting. So when you wanted to start in Hyderabad, you might have done a little bit of research, I'm sure, if you were investing a good amount of money and wanting to start a cafe. What was the kind of research that went into it? And with what point were you convinced that, okay, we can do this and it's something that is viable?
So interestingly, So because I didn't intend to be in this business at all when we came back. So the initial months I was not as involved. So we came back in January 2012. By June, Conçu was already up and running. So in 6 months, by Feb, we had already found a small location. Sahil had found the location, obviously. Did a little bit of research. We went to like cities like Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, just went around. And again, while starting a cafe business was not the idea. He was a pastry chef. He just wanted to do pastry. So basically cakes, like almost like a small cake boutique or a patisserie. Like that was just the idea. We never thought that, all of what we have today in the business was the plan.
Okay.
He knew pastry. He wanted to do pastry, period. Like there was no other thoughts at that point of time. So all we did was just try different pastries across the country. And I would go with him because I had come back. I mean, it's not like I had a full-time job where I had to be present in the city. So I would travel with him. We try different things. And we started extremely small. So literally, like Sahil didn't want to borrow, take big loans, no big plans. We didn't have like Excel sheets and projections and graphs, none of it.
Okay.
Which is very passionate. Took a little bit of money from home saying, okay, we'll rent out the space. This is what we need for deposit. This is what we need for equipment. And pretty much that's it. Month 1 onwards, we already were like doing sales. We had like a lot of orders that we were already fulfilling and stuff. So gradually it just kept picking up, getting busier, paid back whatever he had borrowed from home in less than a year. His thing was, you know what, I've taken this money, I need to pay it back. That's it. And so it was never like we had the pressure of paying back loans or anything that we had borrowed from the bank, none of it. So I guess since that pressure was not there, we were just doing what we enjoyed, right? And we started really small. Like we didn't want to go all out and plan and pump in a lot of money and then have that pressure that, okay, we need to keep this going.
Where did you open this first cafe of yours?
So it was most people don't know, it was in Srinivasa Towers beside ITC Kakatiya in Begumpet.
Okay.
So it was, there's, as soon as you enter that apartment, there are these commercial shutters, right? So the shutter number 3 was us. So it was, including the ground and the mezzanine, it was about 800 SFT. So extremely small. The mezzanine was like a wooden ladder, literally. So it's not like a staircase that takes you up and all. So we would just take all our stock, packaging, whatever we ordered, put it up our shoulders, go put it up, come down, roll down that shutter, roll it up every morning. And it was almost like physical labor work that we were doing. Sahil didn't hire a maid or any help support staff as well. So we'd come in the morning, mop, clean, wash, set up, he'd bake, try different things, put it on the counter. We had some orders, so friends would call and say, hey, I need like 50 macarons today, or I need a cake for my wife and things like that. So we just fulfill those orders, make a little bit extra. And it was not really like we had fixed timings. We didn't have a board outside, nothing. We just had one phone number, which people would call. And that was actually Sahil's personal phone number.
Okay.
So friends and friends of friends would just like share the number and call, and they'd walk in. If we had anything extra, we'd say, okay, we have a few eclairs, we have a few macarons. People will come and pick it up. And when we are done, we just shut down that shutter and go back home. Do you still have any
free macaroons left at the end of the closing?
Funnily enough, we never had to give anything free. We never had to give anything for tasting. Like whatever was made, somebody would come and buy it off. And there were a couple of customers, they were so... I think they are the ones who actually helped us build the brand. Like they were loyalists. Like they would come in every morning and say, hey, what have you got? We're like, we've got this. He's like, pack everything, I'm taking all of it. And they would go giving it around to their friends and, as gifts and stuff. So they, in a sense, were our marketing channels, I guess. And they were just so passionate about telling our story to the world.
Well, nice.
And it was very hard. Like it just felt great to see that belief in us.
Yeah.
And they kind of became friends. And now a lot of them are great friends with us today. They're almost like family to us. So just everything is like baby steps for the business. So no real plans, nothing on computers and Excel sheets. It's just, it's not us. Yeah, that's not
how long were you running the cafe in Begumpet, in that first place that you opened up?
So we took up that space. We rented it for 2 years, but we had to leave in 6 months because we outgrew. Like that space was just not enough for us to keep up with the volumes of orders we started getting in.
Okay.
and we needed a larger kitchen. We needed space for more staff to work in. And also, I think by October, we hired one intern who came in, and we hired like a maid to help us with like washing up and all of it. I think by December, we were out of that space. Found something in Jubilee Hills. It was a house which we kind of shifted all our equipment, set up. And that's where we were. We started not just relying on phone orders and like pre-orders. We started stocking up. We bought a display counter as well, started stocking it up with desserts and stuff. So we had fixed timings. We made like a social media page. We like, this is open. It's closed on Mondays, open till like 6 p.m. on weekdays, weekends, all of that. Started stocking up with basic desserts like cupcakes and macaroons and eclairs. So there was some kind of structure that started evolving in the business. And again, we were there in that space for 2 years. Not really seat. It was almost like a takeaway model, right? People would place an order or walk in, pick up and leave. We just had like a little sofa and some chairs. So then the third space that we moved to, we were there for about 2 years. Again, we realized like now we are outgrowing this space. We had about 25 people on our team by then, including like housekeeping and accounts and packaging and chefs and all of that. So the team started growing. So then we moved to our third location. And that's when we decided that just people will not just come for like desserts, right? Like other than sugar, you need something to drink, you need something to eat. So that's when we added like a beverage menu in the third space of ours. So very limited savory stuff, like occasional, like some croissants or baked savories, but we had a proper beverage menu then. And then we added customer seating as well. So it was about a 40-seater cafe. This was on road number 21, behind Dadu's.
Okay.
So that was our third location. Although most people think that was our first location because that's when we kind of got visibility as well.
So the reason that I took you back to 2012 is because when let's say like somebody like me who visits a Conçu, in my head, I would think that like, okay, they started big, or this is something that has been existent for a really long time. People don't really tune back and listen into how it started. People would assume that it started big, it started with so much money, etc. Which is why I wanted to take you back a little bit, so people who are listening and who want to draw some inspiration, they would know that things always start small.
Absolutely. Like, and when we say small, it was really, really small, right? Like packaging, we didn't get anything printed. We didn't get like printed packaging. We didn't get like business cards, none of it. So literally we went around and in a Meerpet and all, we looked for like a packaging vendor who would just print plain white boxes which are laminated, which serve the purpose. So I told Sahil, that's fine. So I would literally crease all the boxes, make the packaging, punch a sort of like a whole tire ribbon, put a Conçu tag on it, which we also used as business cards. So we're like, you know what, we need to optimize. And so our first packaging was just plain white. And we added character by just adding like hand-tied ribbons and things like that. And we were like, our first set of packaging and branding actually happened in like 2014. So like
almost
2.5 years, after which then we engaged like a branding agency to come on board and do like Conçu's branding. And that's when but whenever we did invest our money into anything, then we made sure that we went for the best. So there's a branding at that point, there were not too many branding agencies, I think, back in India, the kind of work that we like or what's available now. So I found this branding agency. I mean, I would spend a lot of time on the internet on like design websites and things. I was just like passionate, no background in it, but so I found this agency whose work I really liked. So I looked them up and all. They were in Mexico. And I'm like, every project of theirs that I would see and I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Like, I really like their style. And then I told Sahil that, when we get our branding, I actually wrote to them. I sent them an email and all of that. We got a quote. At that point, we got a quote for about 4 lakhs for branding. And that's huge, right? Like today, it's nothing. But back then, no one had heard about spending 4 lakhs on branding. And I was like, Sahil, it's either them or nobody. I mean, I know it doesn't matter to you, but somehow I feel like I've been in this long enough to add value. And I'm like, I think we should really go with these guys. I negotiated really hard with them. I can brought that quote down to like 2.7 lakhs, which still was a big amount.
Negotiation skills, I must say.
Yeah, I think this is the first time somebody bargained with them as well. I'm like, you know what,
Indians.
it is, yeah,
It
it's
is an
just
Indian thing.
my Guju blood, this thing. So we did it, and that's the identity Conçu has today. The logo that was built, the font for the Conçu, the colors, everything was a part of that branding exercise. Um, Lasted for a good 10 years.
Yeah.
Feels to me almost timeless because people recognize Conçu with their heart.
Yeah.
And when we decided to go for printing as well, then we didn't go to any packaging printers. We went to Pragati, who were like one of the best in Asia. We were like, if you're doing something, then we better do it very right. Otherwise, there's no point of, then don't do it. Like if it's a half-hearted attempt, or if it's you're compromising because you feel like you can't go for the best, then I'm not saying that's the right route for everybody, but for us, we were like, we won't do it. We'll wait. Like, there's no harm. Like, if you waited 2 years, you can wait another 2 years.
Yeah.
You do it, then make sure that you do it the way you want it.
Yeah.
And that's how then we started making business decisions as well, in terms of how we were doing our spaces, or what we wanted to add, or what kind of equipment we were buying and things like that. So right now, everything we do, like even if it's a choice of getting a coffee machine or ingredients, like we exactly know what we want and what standard we want, and we will make sure we do all the research to get that.
Interesting. So cut to now, where is Conçu standing? How many outlets do you have? What's the kind of business that you're doing? How big is your team?
So as of today, we have 10 outlets that are operational. We have 2 more coming up in Bombay soon. So hopefully before the end of this year, we'll have 1, and early next year, the second one in Bombay is going to open. We are always looking for more spaces in more cities. But again, unlike other people where they decide where they want to be, they identify locations and then they go and look for those, that's not how we operate. Like we're like, hey, we look around a nice property, someone suggests, or, someone gets in touch. We like the property. You feel like, okay, location's great. We go and do a little bit of research, okay, and if we like it, then we take it on. But it's never like, okay, next I have to be in Bangalore, or next I have to be in Bombay, and then all our energy is channelized or focused on that.
Okay.
We just go with the flow. We see something that we like. If it feels right, then some years we've had like simultaneously worked on 3 properties at one time.
Okay.
Sometimes for like 2 years, we have nothing happening. So, but we don't feel pressured that, we've had a target and we kind of haven't met that target, kind of a thing. We just go with the flow.
So these 8-10 that you're talking about, all of them are based out of Hyderabad as of now?
So we have 9 in Hyderabad, including 1 at the airport.
Okay.
Domestic departures. We've got 1 in Bangalore last July that opened. So yeah, that's 10 in total.
Interesting. And how big is your team?
Including all our central kitchen and support staff and all of it, I would say about 425 to 450. But it keeps changing, right? So sometimes you have a few more, sometimes less. Things keep moving around, but just under 450 at the moment.
Interesting. 1 or 2 more questions about Conçu before we start talking about you.
Right.
So when you're managing a brand like this, I really understood from whatever you said that the branding element is very important. I will touch upon that a little later. But what was the biggest challenge for you when you were transitioning from something small to, okay, you were convinced that this is going to grow into something really, really big and meaningful? What was a biggest challenge that you faced and how did you overcome it? I know this is a question that everybody asks on every podcast possible, but I think I see a lot of learning here because you've transitioned into something really small to something really big. I see that you were convinced and you were making numbers, which is why you were convinced. But what was a challenge that you've come across and you were, stationed for a really long time to face it?
So interestingly, when you said transitioning from small to something big and meaningful, I think for us, it was just transitioning into something meaningful or more meaningful. Like big was never a dream, right? Like, because every step we took, and I still say it to date, were baby steps. Like, okay, this we've sort of perfected. Now, what next? How can we go on to do something more? So it was never like, okay, we are here, in 5 years, we want to be here. It was never how we operated. And I don't think going forward also that's sort of going to be the way we will work. And we're very clear on how we want the business to move forward. Yeah. So in spite of, having such a large team or, sometimes you have investors and things like that, like we are very clear on how to move forward. So, it's not like there are all these conflicting opinions and, you get carried away and say, okay, maybe I need to do this or I need to take this advice on board and all.
Yeah.
Like, as people, Sahil and I are very clear on how we want to operate.
Yeah.
So it's easier. Like, we just know and we're like, okay, this is how we're doing this. And so for us, it was always like, how do we make this business more meaningful?
Okay.
How do we add more value to the team, to all the people who are stakeholders, whether it's the vendors, whether it's people who are in the team, whether it's guests who are coming in. It's, for us, we don't treat it as a business which end of the day is hitting some numbers, right? For
Fair
us,
enough.
it's like, we wake up, we want to go somewhere to spend our time, really enjoy it. And during that day, if we can help other people learn what skills that we've learned over a period of time so that they can go forward in their lives as well.
There's something that I want to add here. So I've always been a person who has an end in mind. So this is something that I've imbibed while I was reading a lot of self-help books growing up, that you need to have an end in mind, which later, very recently, that I've realized with the podcasting especially, is that, when you're focusing on a certain level of viewership, etc., it makes you anxious to like look at big things in the future. So I've recently started learning that, like, focus on the next step. Okay, this podcast is what we have now. This is what we are going to focus on. So it actually makes you less anxious also.
Correct,
when you
right?
stop thinking about what is, lying way ahead in the future. So I think I agree with you. And I think that's also like a secret ingredient for you to like making it big. I know you don't want to say it, but it is definitely a
It is, right? It is, because I think most people, they get so caught up in what they want to achieve in the end and where they want to be, that they forget enjoying every part of that journey. Because you're just so hyper focused that I need to get there.
Yeah.
Say, not everybody gets there, right? And then you're going to be disappointed. So you don't think that, I moved from step A, I've gone up to step F. You're only thinking of, like, say, getting to Z. And if you're not going to be there, that doesn't mean that you failed, right? You've still moved forward, right? You've still gone 100%. Ahead and done something. So just feel grateful that you were able to get there, rather than just beating yourself about not making it where you wanted to be in the end. Sometimes destinations change, your final goal changes, right? Like, it's not what you set out to be is what you have to be 10 years from now. You will change as a person, you will evolve, your thought processes will evolve, your situations will change. And if you just keep yourself more flexible, I think life's just far more enjoyable doing that. So
fair enough. So I think let's come back to the branding element. So I love the branding of Conçu. I think the colors really, like, when you look at that color, there's a certain recall value that, like, oh, okay, Conçu has a similar brand colors. You use pastels. I love pastels. They're beautiful. How important do you think branding is for a cafe or anybody in the food industry? How important do you think branding is in general?
Personally, for me, because I believe in a lot in, like, design and art and, like, colors and touch, feel, your experience. Because it's, say, if you're in the food business, it's just not about your palate, right? It's not about what you taste. It has to be an experience of all your senses. You walk in, your smell should remind you of something. Like, say, you have a barista counter over there and you smell the coffee beans. Every time you walk in, you do eat a cheesecake and that reminds you of something. But at the same time, the smell of the beans is working on you. There's a certain kind of music that you're playing over there. Like, in totality, when all of those things come together, I think that's the whole experience of the package. If that's not consistent, then from one location to another, second location to a third, you'll feel the disconnect. And then your brand recall is not that strong. For us, because all of that comes from, like creatively, I am running or driving that brand since the beginning. So I've always been actively involved. At no point, even when my daughter was born or when I was pregnant, I didn't take time out. So it's always consistent. There were a few years in between where I was like, you know what, maybe I should not be so involved. Maybe we need fresh ideas. We need someone else to come in as well. So at that point, I started taking advice. Like, I started showing it to everybody. What do you think? What do you think? And everybody has an opinion, right? And everybody's opinion may not kind of match yours. So you start taking everybody's feedback on, and then you try to develop a product which has you're trying to please everyone. And I failed miserably. Like, I didn't like what packaging would come out, or like people didn't like it. Like, you could see the disconnect.
Yeah.
And then at one point, Sahil was like, why are you getting so stressed? Like, you don't have to please anybody, right? Like, it's your baby. You know what you want to do out of it.
Yeah.
Then fair enough. At some point, you did want to give that sort of a freedom to get fresh ideas. But if it's not working, then you should also know where to cut it off and go back to doing something that was working for you.
Yeah.
And that was like a eureka moment for me. And I'm like, yes, I've been so involved doing this. And it's my personality that reflects so strongly in this. And I think I should, till I have the opportunity, I should continue doing that. So then there was this whole reset. And now I'm very, very particular. I'm like, I like it or not. Okay, yes, once in a while you send it out for like feedback. But in the end, I take the design or brand call. I'm very territorial. I'm not giving it to anybody else. This is mine.
Fair enough.
So that's why you see that consistency. There were times when, surprisingly, like there were stores where I've not been actively involved in the design process because I was busy and we had like 3-4 stores at once.
Okay.
So I've had customers who've gone there and they were like, well, you're not involved in this design process.
Yeah.
They said it doesn't have the Swati touch. And fair enough, I was not involved in that design process. I was not involved in the color selection or the furniture setup and stuff like that. So people could actually tell the difference. Or if they go to a particular store, like they go to Banjara Hills and they were like, oh, this just has a different vibe. And I know that it was during COVID. So I spent a lot of time. I had all the time in the world to like just focus on that store and make sure, right from the landscaping to every design element to every color, I was actively involved. So you can tell the difference. And I feel like branding is everything. Like if you may have a great product, but if you're not able to package it right, and right doesn't have to be fancy. Like right has to be, it has to be able to tell your story or tell the person what the product is, right? Like your value has to reflect in the brand. And so I think that's something that a lot of people overlook, or they give it to a third party saying, hey, I don't know anything about it. Like I'm starting like a cafe or I'm starting like a fashion house or whatever, do the branding. But if you're not really involved, they don't know it's somebody else who's building your brand, right? Like that sort of doesn't work. So you really need to be involved over there.
So I want to talk about the cafe culture in Hyderabad. I have become a coffee person in the last 2 years. I have grown up thinking, I had like an affinity against coffee, tea and all of that because my dad used to consume a lot of tea. So the smell of it he used to drink 20 cups a day. 20 cups a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I was like, I am never going to get addicted to tea or coffee, but I have to blame it on Hyderabad because it has wonderful cafes that offer one beautiful coffee. I just had a good coffee right now also. So I've become a coffee person and I'm blaming it on Hyderabad, by the way. So the trend of like Hyderabad, the cafe culture, the coffee, you might have observed it very, very closely. Do you want us to take through it? And also please share if you have any other favorite coffees that you want to. I'm not really sure if you're comfortable doing that, but I would love to listen to like what are your favorite coffees in the city.
My favorite coffee in the city, I would say I always go to True Black. When I want a coffee, I will go there. Again, there's an interesting backstory to this. The first time I had coffee from True Black was not when the brand was already existing.
Okay.
So I used Rohit, who's one of the founders of True Black. He also used to shoot for Conçu. So
he's also into art.
Yeah, he's a photographer and now an entrepreneur. So we were in the studio and we were shooting like for some cakes and stuff. And he had this little machine, coffee machine. And he's like, would you like a coffee? And I was like, sure, why not? Like we have a few hours to kill here. So I was like, okay. And then that was the best cup of coffee I'd tried in like months. Whoa. And it was just an espresso shot. And if that's done well, if an espresso shot is done well, then you don't need sugar, you don't need milk, you don't need anything. You're just going to enjoy that as is.
Yeah.
And that was a great cup. And I'm like, I was sold right then. I was like, okay, if you're opening something, I'm coming. I'm getting my coffee from there. So I go there. In the city, I normally don't get too much time to like go out and explore. When some friends are going and all, we end up going. Usually ends up just being dinner. So not a great time for coffee.
Fair enough.
I usually go to Roast. because one of their outlets is right across my house. So that's when we started like hanging out with friends late night and stuff. I'm like, I'm too tired to go anywhere. Why don't you just come here? So True Black and Roaster places in the city, I always go to for coffee. So if it's not Conçu, then definitely you'll find me in one of those places.
So I actually heard an interesting story about Nishant, who set up Roastery, thanking you way back in time when they set up a cafe in Banjara Hills. What's the backstory?
So I don't know what the backstory is actually.
Okay.
But
were you asked about this ever?
On a Women's Day, they were doing a set of like series for Women's Day.
Okay.
Again, Rohit had come and shot that clip. So I'm a bit lost about that backstory, but
Okay.
then yeah, so they did add like a thank you note saying, Swati, you inspired us to be in this industry or something of that sort. But I didn't realize like there was
A backstory.
a backstory to it.
Fair enough.
I've met him a couple of times at the store, maybe at a couple of other places as well. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to like have longer conversations with him. Maybe Sahil has connected with him, but I mean, it's nice
Fair
to hear.
enough.
So
Fair enough. So if you're looking at the coffee culture or a cafe culture in Hyderabad back in 2012 and 2024, what do you think has majorly changed?
everything, I think, like 2012, you could count on your fingers. There was like Coffee Day, there was Barista, there was just a handful of other places,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
none of them served great coffee because
I
you didn't have
100%
great
agree
baristas,
with you.
right? Like
Yeah.
being a barista was not really a
thing.
skill
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
The coffee would be burned. That machine is never clean. You see that spout, and it's all like the milk is dried up for like
Yeah.
days, weeks. I don't even know. Like coffee tasted terrible, and you had to add so much sugar to make it just palatable.
Yeah.
And now I think there's just, I don't know, like dozens and dozens of good places where you can get great coffee, and being a barista is recognized as a valuable skill. People are putting more effort into like developing the beverage menus, getting good beans, getting good machines. So you see that evolution. Like when coffee was just sort of an add-on to like you hanging out with friends, ordering something to eat, and then you're like, okay, let me order something to drink with it. But now people head out for that great cup of coffee, right?
Yeah,
They want a takeaway, or they want to go there and have a good cup. It's not always about, hey, I want to catch up with people and I'm going there. Like there are times when I just want a great coffee, and I know a lot of my friends as well. We want
Yeah.
a great coffee and we'll step out.
Yeah.
If it's people, not with people, doesn't matter. And that I think in the last decade has changed. So
100%. So at this point, I see a lot of new cafes opening up. Do you think there would be a point where there would be market exhaustion where people stop opening cafes because there's a new one every single day?
at some point it will plateau down, right? Or, people will get bored, something else will come. So
Is there enough market to it? Like where if like let's say like the 30 cafes in Banjara Hills, Jubilee Hills, there would be enough business for everyone. I mean, that's from a very neutral standpoint, from somebody who's a consumer, I would be like, there's so many cafes opening. Will everybody have enough business? That's a question that pops up in my mind.
but I think it's not just in cafes, it is across F&B or retail or services, consumer services, right?
yeah.
There will always be, when something's working, then everybody wants to get onto that bandwagon. Everybody's trying to do, or, sort of get a pie in that market share.
Yeah.
Some people sustain, some people don't. Like we see a lot of places opening, but at the same time, there are a lot of places that shut as well. That you kind of won't realize because you just forget about it, right? And go, something else comes in.
Yeah.
It's sort of scary when I see a lot of people investing a lot of money because, like I said, we started really small. I see some places they just go all out and spend so much money on it, but you need to have that experience. You need to have that product. You need to have that whole system in place
Agreed.
to keep that going, right? It's not
Yeah.
just the first few months. And sometimes when you've not done all that groundwork, I don't know. It's hard to sustain.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Agreed. I think starting small would be like the best suggestion for anybody
it is
who
not.
wants to
The
start
thing is, I
anything.
think a lot of people don't want to do that because it's like I
The
want to go all
glamour
out, yeah,
is- yeah.
and it's great if people start slow, not just in business, but in everything in life, right? Like, um, just what's the rush? Like, where do you want to run? What do you want to do at the end of the day?
Agreed.
Like, I always, even when I see people on the road, they're like so, the way people drive, and I'm like, you know what? At the signal, I'm going to catch up with you anyways, right? You're still going to be stuck here. So, what did you get with this extra 5 seconds, right? Uh, it's all that anxiety. Like, people just don't know where to expend all that. It shows in their relationships, it shows in their like business, it shows in like their offices. Like, you can tell, like, now I've started observing people and how they react to situations, and I just sit back and I just watch, and how they drive or how they treat people when they're making like ordering at restaurants, or how people react on holidays. It just tells you so much about them. And if I see that anxiety, I'm like, hey, I'm not coming in that aura of yours, you can keep it to yourself.
Were you always calm as a person?
I was always calm, but I was never someone who studied other people as much. I would just be in my own world doing my own things and all that. Like, anxiety, other people's anxiety don't get to me.
Okay.
But now with like business growing, I have a daughter growing up. There's so much social media. There's just mindless scrolling. Like, I think say about 25% of my time, for others it must be less, more, possibly more. Like, so much of it goes in stuff which is unproductive, right? Like, just scrolling on social media. Yes, there is great content out there, something that's meaningful, but like, say 99% of what you're consuming, you don't even need, right? But we're just sitting over there like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, way past your bedtime.
Agreed.
For what? So now I realize, like, this is wrong. We are not heading in the right direction. Somebody's got to change it. I'm like, I don't know about others, but I'm definitely changing that about my life.
Yeah,
It's
Swati is not on social media. That's why I tried finding her for a really long time. I did not find her.
So
don't
I
look
am
for her.
technically on social media, but I'm trying to do this 1 week on, 3 weeks off kind of a thing. So I'll
Interesting.
activate my account. And just yesterday, me and Sahil were driving back home, and then something came up out of this glass blowing workshop that I did. And he was like, I met somebody else, and they were chatting with me about the workshop. So he was asking what was that conversation. I said nothing. When I went to Bombay, I was doing this workshop, and I put it up on social media. So my friend reached out, and she's like, hey, my kids are in Bombay right now. Just give me the details. I'll do the workshop for them. They signed up. They liked it. If I had not posted about it, obviously she would not have seen it. Her sons would have not gone and done the workshop. So he's like, I don't understand. Why do you keep deactivating your account? Like, it's silly, right? Like, why?
Yeah.
Why don't you just log out? I'm like, no, I don't want to be found. Like, it's my choice, right? I don't want to be found. He's like, but if you're putting stuff that's inspiring other people, or they're learning or whatever, and most of my content will be about some workshops or something that I would have traveled, or some new skill that I'm learning. That's the content. Like, there are never selfies or never family photos and things like that. Like, very rarely. It's always about the business or something I am doing where it takes me forward in life, and I post about it, or things like mental health or whatever, things that people don't want to talk about. And I'm like, I have no shame. Like, I will, if I have a family, extended family where people are full of like, there's a lot of depression, there's suicides, alcoholism, all of that. I'm like, I'm not ashamed talking about coming from extended family that's had all of these issues, right? I'm like, why is everyone trying to hide whatever they faced in life or what their families are facing? I'm like, what is there to hide? Talk about it, guys.
Why do you think people are hiding? Why do you think? I'm 100% sure there's still a certain level of stigma. People want to put up a certain face in front of others, which is absolutely understandable to some degree. But if it's troubling you inside, I think they should go out and talk about it and seek help. But why do you think that people are not able to openly talk about these things?
I think two things. It's either denial. They just don't want to admit
That's a good
it.
point. Yeah.
Denial is something that I see in a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the second thing I think is they don't want to be judged. It's judgment and denial. Like, the two things. Like, some people like, oh, what will that person think about me? Like, how will I go out? How will I? I'm like, how does it matter to you? What, like, someone wants to think something about you, they will, no matter how much you do in life. if someone wants to judge you, they still will.
Yeah.
And I've at this point just decided I don't care, like literally, like
Yeah.
I'm not harming you. I'm not getting into your way. I'm not, you know, as long as I'm keeping to myself, doing my thing, and it's not affecting anyone else in a negative way, I'm like, you know what? I don't care about your judgments. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
And you stop thinking about whether I'm going to judge you or somebody else is going to judge you, right? In the end, does that really matter? Does that improve your quality of life? It definitely makes it worse. I don't think. Just stop thinking about it, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so much anxiety that builds in, depression, then you're feeling like you're not good enough, and then you'll fake your life in social media, all sorts of things, right? Like why are we
Yeah.
doing this to ourselves? Just it's pointless.
There is somebody who's actually coaching me a couple of months ago. She told something really strong that is still stuck with me, is that all these things happen, the points that you mentioned, being in denial or being worried about being judged, all these come from not having a strong sense of self.
Absolutely.
So if you do not believe or do not know yourself enough, or you constantly try to please people and do whatever they are expecting out of you, and then you're moving away from who you are, and it's causing you trouble. That's why all the anxiousness, all the depression, all of this stems from there. So I think having a strong sense of self is very important, and I think a lot of us don't have it.
And fair enough, like, we've been raised in societies where
Yeah.
we've never been taught to give ourselves enough importance or attention, right?
Yeah.
Like I've gone through a major people pleasing phase. Like everyone says, I just didn't know how to say no.
Yeah.
Till date, I sometimes do struggle, but I'm like, you know what? If I have to say no, I have to say no. Like, it's a truth that
Yeah.
if I don't stand up for myself, then I will go all out, putting in more energy, juggling work and child and home and this and that. And like, you're constantly running, especially as women, there's just so many roles that you kind of have to juggle. It's not like when I see men, and I'm not don't want to start this gender conversation that, we are like this and they are like that or anything of that sort. But I've seen that they can't, they can multitask when it comes to their own work. But they can't multitask when it has to do with like a relationship and career and family and all of that.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, I'm supposed to go out with the child. That's all I can do. Then I will not be able to manage. Oh, I have to pick up this, drop this person there, do this, take a work call, organize something for my parents. Like they won't do that. Like, oh, I have to go on a play date with my child. So that's it. Now don't call me. Like, oh, I'm doing this. Like our entire lives, like from the time you wake up till you go to bed, you're only scheduling, organizing, making sure other people's lives are going on, right? Because as women, that's all we are doing. We're just scheduling things for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's for most women, but at least my life, it's like that. Like wake up, making sure the daughter goes to school, then run, go to the gym, try to force myself to take that time out for my health, then go to work. While I'm doing that, I'm taking calls, I'm sending emails, my mom's calling. I have to like plan her travel tickets, book this. It's entire day goes like that.
Yeah.
But with men, like they just go shower, go off to work, come back. If they want to eat dinner, they eat dinner. If they don't want to, they go out with their friends. That's it, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, you're juggling a lot at work, but you're not really actively involved in. So it's like till it's not done, right?
Yeah.
Till my system doesn't shut down and everything's in disarray, people are not going to realize that I'm putting in so much effort to make sure everything's smooth.
Yeah.
And that happened for the longest time. And then in the last couple of years, I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry. I need time out for myself.
Yeah.
I'm going. I pick up the keys. I'm gone. I make my plans and I'm gone. I'm like, someone's going to sort it out. It's fine. If I thought, oh, what will my mother-in-law think about me, or what will my husband think about me, or what will my mom tell me about me going off like this or going off on a vacation, I would never have pushed myself to do this.
Yeah.
I'm like, again, judgment, right? Because what will they think about? Today I tell my mom, like sometimes if she says, oh, but did you tell your mother-in-law about when the time comes, I'll inform her, right? Like, don't tell me how I should live my life. That's it. And not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very happy I'm doing this. And everything else around is going great. Like, My in-laws love me to bits. My mother's very happy. My child loves me.
Yeah.
So it's when I started doing it for myself, I realized it kind of affects all of them in a positive way.
Yeah.
Initially, maybe in certain families or certain situations, they can't or may not have been able to digest it. Luckily, I'm in an ecosystem where they understand me and they're like, okay, if she's like this, as long as we are all happy, it's not bothering, we are not bothering her, she's not bothering us. Let's all just do our own thing.
I have a very interesting take on whatever you just said. So you here were successful in drawing boundaries, which I've seen. So like I am 30 years old and all my friends are of the same age. I am very, very, very surprised when a friend, it is a boy or a girl, it's a thing with all of us, is that when they tell me that my mom expects me home at 9 p.m., I'm like, but you're 30 years old now. If you said that back in school, I totally understand. I absolutely am conscious of the fact that they'll be trying to be respectful, etc., etc. But if you want to stay out a little longer, or it's not just staying out because people have given me answers like it's not safe to be out. I agree. It's about doing what you are pleased with rather than, trying to please your parents, etc., etc., drawing those boundaries. Because at a very young age, it came to me very naturally to draw those boundaries, even with my parents. And I can say this with a sense of pride that my parents have also let me have that sense of self for me. I could tell them that this is what I want, and they've been respectful of that. But with the people that I'm seeing around, they themselves are, giving in when they're expected to do some things. Like, for example, go and do a certain puja, like on a Saturday. Do it if it's pleasing for you or if it's something that you want to do. But why are you doing it? Because your parents are expecting out of you, and not a lot of people are questioning this.
It's not, right? Exactly.
Which is very unsettling. I thought it was something that was a school thing when, even then I was like, I used to tell my parents that this is what is up, and they were okay, like, you do your thing. With my, peers, with my friends and all of that, they were not able to draw those boundaries. And I was like, okay, we are all young. We are expected to do certain things, but it's the same even now.
Even now, things are changing, and not enough people are questioning, right? We were all raised in ecosystems, or whether it's school, whether it's at home. Like, imagine, like, if I back then, say 30 years ago, questioned my teacher that, why are you making me believe this? Like, explain it to me.
Yeah.
I would have probably just got on whack saying, what, don't waste my time. Just mug this up and go and write it in the exam. Like, this is not a part of the curriculum, right? Or this is out of syllabus.
Yeah.
It's almost like that in life as well. Like, the ecosystem that I grew up in was very, very different. Like, I lost my dad when I was 2.5. My mother raised me and my sister single-handedly. We came from like a conservative, like Gujarati traditional family and all. But my grandmother, she was just something else. Like, in spite of being in that traditional setting, she was very progressive in her thoughts. So, like, the first thing she told my mom in like a couple of months after we lost my dad, she was like, come, we're signing you up for driving classes. And this is what I spoke in my previous podcast as well. Like, my mom was 30 when she lost my dad. I was 2.5. My sister was like 5.5. And she was like, what? Like, is this the time? Like, in weeks you're telling me to go? Like, this is not even necessary. My grandmother's like, you will thank me at some point in your life that I taught you this skill. She's like, just sign up. It didn't make sense to my mom at that point of time. Today she comes and tells me, if your grandmother had not pushed me for this, I would not have sort of gathered that strength to be able to raise you guys. Like, my grandparents made my mom do like she came from a small town. She studied in like a Hindi medium school. And all of a sudden she had like to go to the banks, sign checks. Like with my dad's insurance money, she built a house so that she could give one portion on rent and we could move in the second portion so that, there's a little bit of regular income because she had no income, right? It was a family business.
Yeah.
And it was so much was thrown at her at 30, which she just wasn't ready. Like, who would have thought, right? She did all of that. And her only thing was, tomorrow when my daughters grow up, they should not be in this situation. They should be able to be independent and do everything. So as a household, then we had a grandfather as well, but we lost him when I was in class 5. So pretty much it was a house where it was just women. Like, it was my grandmother, my mother, me and my sister. So it was never that we needed validation. Somebody had to tell us that it's too late. Go with your brother. Somebody will drop you, pick you up. We were on our own, literally, like. and no one interfered in decisions. Like my grandmother would say, like, why are you wearing that skirt that's so long? Like, if I had some denim shorts and although she was wearing saris, she was like, this looks nice. And this, she could tell. And it was not because of the length of the skirt, but she could tell good design, good fashion sense. She's like, wear this and go. No, why are you going to this birthday party? Why are you wearing this? You look like, it doesn't look nice types. But, so it was so nice to be in that setting where everybody made their own choice. There were times when I sneaked out at night, midnight, gone with my friends. Of course, I was like, what, 16, 17, not, I got caught with my...
All of us have these
stories. but it was never like, my mother was never worried because she knew who my friends were. So she knew I was hanging out with the right people. She knew that she didn't need to be worried. Like, they would get me home at whatever time. She had a contact number. So she's like, if I need to call you, I'll call you. But she would never call me. My friends, all the guys also, they had permission things. Oh, I have to be home by like 10. I have to be home at 11. And I'm like, I can go whenever I want. I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah.
I mean, of course. Like, yeah, I'm safe, right? I'm with you guys.
Yeah.
And there were times when I was with a set of people my mom wasn't comfortable with me. She told me at that day, I want you back at 10 o'clock. I respected that. I would have pushed the 10 to 11. But then I was like, because I understood what was safe, what was not safe. I didn't understand that, but my mom kind of got a sense, right? And I was like, totally respect that. And that freedom is not given to most people. Like, their families will tell them, we know what is right for you. Like, even now you will hear, we know what is right for you. Don't question us.
I was just going to say that the kind of upbringing that does not give you a rationale behind whatever is going on and will tell you that you have to follow this. Yeah. What nonsense. Just, I understand the fact that there's like an age difference. You have a certain experience that you're coming with, but if you're not helping the child with a rationale behind it, the child will never put a thought to, whatever you're asking of them, and they will get conditioned to following instructions. And after you, they will expect other people to follow instructions.
They will pass it on to their kids. That trauma that generational trauma is going to just pass
100%.
on. And somebody's got to break that cycle, right?
Yeah.
And in the last few years, now that I look back, I look at family structures, because I lived in a very different family structure. So today, what I am, I can tell the difference what my background has had in me being what I am today. Yeah. If I was not in this setting, perhaps I would not be what I am today.
100%.
And most people, what we think are normal household settings, they are just screwed in the head.
Agreed.
And sometimes I'm like, oh God, like, what is wrong with you? And they're still living in denial, and they're still trying to, people please, or whatever things, like they feel like this is what I need to do in life, or this is where I'm supposed to go because, my parents had this expectation of me and I need to live up to it, or I need to do this for my kids because my parents did this for me. I'm like, no, you don't. I don't need to be expected to save a ton of money for my child.
Yeah.
Like, I did it myself, right? My husband did it himself. My child, if he raised her right, she'll do it for herself. Like, I don't have to make sure that there's enough in the bank and for education and all of that. Of course, not like I'm just going to spend all that money and say, you know what, you're on your own. But when are we going to give ourselves that credit? When are we going to spend that money on ourselves? When are we going to live our own lives? Because either we're living for our parents or we're living for our kids, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's doing that. So in the end, nobody's happy.
Agreed. So what else do you do? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read books? What do you do in your free time?
Now I'm consciously trying to make free time, because again, I learned from somewhere that there is no free time that will come to you on a platter. You have to make that time for yourself, right? If you're working and you choose to just work there's no end to it. You can at midnight get a call and you feel pressure to answer to that customer. Especially in the F&B business, there's no start, no end, no holidays, no time off.
Yeah.
When the whole world is holidaying, you're making sure you're giving them that service to enjoy, right?
I remember you telling me that I'm busier on the weekends.
Weekends, not anymore though, because I now realize that weekends are my time. Like, I've gone through that hustle. Now there are people who are doing things that I don't need to be doing on a weekend. We've made that system strong enough where Sahil and I can step out, and it's fine. Like, initially I was like, oh my God, but these are the people I've worked with and I was with them every weekend. Now am I abandoning them? And I'm like, no, I went through that hustle. Now it's their time for that hustle, right? After 10 years, it'll be somebody else's time for that hustle. And they will be doing what I'm doing today. Hopefully, if they've done it right, then they're going to be able to take time out on weekends to spend with their families and things like that.
Yeah.
So I now started in the last year. I just randomly woke up one day and I'm like, hey, I'm going to make this 40 before 40 list for myself
Okay.
and put in this insane target of things that
40. You have 40 items on your list.
I finished about 32 of those.
It's a little difficult to like remember 40 things, if I have to be honest, but great that you ticked off 32.
Yeah.
Are there any interesting ones on them that we want to draw inspiration from?
It's such a long list. Where do I start? But I can, I started reading for the longest time. Like, I had a best friend from school. We were really, really tight, very close. I lost her in an accident when I was about 25.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And since then, I stopped reading because I got busy with university life and all of that. And then, we used to share a lot. I moved to a different country. I lost her. Somehow, when you get busy, there's certain things that you enjoyed doing in the past, which you just forget about, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God, I used to read so much, right? From like when I was in class 2, I would just read every book in the library and I haven't read. And that's something I enjoyed. So one of the things in that list was read 40 books before I turned 40. I'm on book number 36. And like I'm reading 4 books a month at least.
What books are you reading?
Everything, right?
So you did 36 books. So what was the most interesting book that you read?
One which is very interesting was this book called Palace of Illusions.
I read it, yes.
Then there was this other book called 40 Rules of Love, which had a lot about like Rumi. And then right now
I've gifted at least 10 people this book, 40 Rules of Love.
Same, right?
Beautiful book.
Yeah. And it just came to me by chance,
Yeah.
right? So there's a customer who became quite like very friendly with me. So she and her family's been coming to Conçu for about 7-8 years now. And I was having one of these conversations out of the blue. Like I'd known her for years and we've never chatted up. And then she travels a lot as well. And she's 45. And I was just sitting with her. I'm like, hey, Sheetal, we started talking. It got very intense, that conversation. And at some point I started reading and these are the 40 things I want to do. And she's like, hey, we can travel together. We can do one of these things together and all. And these 40 things I wanted to do with 40 different people in my life who matter to me. So I've done everything from mixology class to learning piano to reading 40 books, watching 40 meaningful movies. One of them is to Antarctica, obviously. So this thing came after I did my Antarctica trip. I came back and I was like, this is something I wanted to do forever. Never really had the money for it. And then at one point I was like, you'll always think that money will be more useful somewhere else, or I would do this, or I would buy a car, I would put it in a property, and you'll not end up doing these things that you want, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, screw it. I want to go. I went. So when I came back, I was like, for 15 years, this was my dream that I want to go to Antarctica. Not even sure why. It was just there at the back of my head. It happened, right? If you manifest it enough, you end up doing it. So I was like, let me make a list of 40 things, whatever you got to lose. If you end up doing, great. And I think it was just, I'm very, very powerful at manifestation. I think everything in life, again, I think it's just whether you call it positive thinking or manifestation or universe aligning things, it's just whatever I want in life, it just falls into place.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh, you made it work, right? Yes. Some people say it's luck. I'm like, yes, maybe. Whatever it is, but there's nothing. It just happened. So I was like, okay, then why don't, if I know that I have this power of manifestation, I should utilize it, right? I shouldn't do more things. So I wanted to scuba dive. So then me and my daughter went off on a week. It was very random. I saw something on Instagram. It was an art and yoga retreat for 2 weeks. So I wrote to them. I'm like, I can't do 2 weeks and I don't want to do yoga, but can I just bring my daughter for this art? There's this potter I used to follow on Instagram called Thomas from Goa. He was going to the Andamans to do this retreat. I was like, I've been chasing this guy for 6-8 months to do a workshop, and then I never get the dates from their team. I'm like, now I found this. Just in 2 days, I called them. They sent me a link. I made the payment, booked the tickets. Me and my daughter just went off in April.
Nice.
Went to the Andamans. I did scuba diving. She did pottery. We were just sitting by the beach. We just cut off from the world. There's hardly any internet over there. And we loved just being over there. So I wanted a tattoo for years. I've been wanting to get a tattoo. Nothing aligned. And people say that, that tattoo will come at a time when it has to find you, right? So no matter how hard you try, that happened. Every month I would be doing something. Bungee jumping is still on my list, which I'll probably do it in the next couple of months. I wanted to be on all 7 continents. So I have my tickets booked to Africa next in like a couple of
Wow.
weeks. But with this whole monkeypox thing, I don't know. I hope that trip doesn't get cancelled. Everything's non-refundable. So I'm taking my daughter for like the Great Migration, because I'm like, it's probably once in a lifetime thing, right? She
Yeah,
doesn't know
yeah.
about it, but like, who knows from 10
Fair
years from
enough.
now, will that phenomena even happen? So I'm like, so we're going. I wanted to embroidery. Like I used to embroider, like my mom used to embroider a lot. So summer holidays, like when I was in class 4 and 5, all us cousins, we used to sit and embroider. Didn't do it for years, and very randomly there was a play date with a few friends, and one of the mothers, who's a friend of mine, she got these kits for us, and she said, all the mothers, let's embroider. I don't think anybody else did. I finished that. I was like, yeah, this is one thing on my list. I wanted to make like 40 pieces of art.
This is very interesting, the list concept. Like a lot of us make lists, but we don't get around finishing them off.
I was surprised because, so the target it started somewhere like about 6-8 months before I turned 40. And then I was like, before I end my 40th year. So it's not like before my 40th birthday, which is next month. I was like, it's a long list of a lot of things. So I'm like, let's be practical. So before I end up before my 41st birthday, I wanted to finish all of this. So like I wanted to
Fair
go to
enough.
40, like finish 40 countries, be on all 7 continents, go to Antarctica, travel. Northern Lights is one of the things. Pottery was one of the things which I did. Embroidery, painting, reading 40 books. That is something I never thought I'd get past 4 books. Because if you've not read for like decades, it's not something that you can just pick up, right?
You know, with reading, I think you should find interesting books. If you find interesting books, I think it's a very easy flow.
It is, right? Like it started very, again, I think that universe will find, when it has to find you, it'll find you. So a friend gave me, my husband's best friend, I'm very close to him as well. So he gave me this book called Laws of the Spirit World.
Okay.
And it's about
What
past
is it
life
about? Oh.
past life regression and stuff like that, and just like these 7 realms and things. I was never into spirituality or any of this,
Okay.
but that's a book, like you said, 40 rules of rough life. There are certain books that have to find you, and they will
Yeah.
find you, and
Yeah.
that's how this whole journey started. So from there, then I read like Many Lives, Many Masters. Then a lot of,
Is that a good book?
yeah, I mean, I thought it was sort of, it put things in the spirituality perspective for me.
Okay.
So I think that was an immediate or natural follow up to Laws of, and it was random how all these books landed. Because someone would have given it to me, someone lent it to me, then I read something, so I bought something else. And there've been books that I've been reading, stuff on like business. I started reading the Bhagavad Gita like 2-3 days ago. So just there's no plan that these are the kind of books I have to read, but it's everything from there's one which I read was the Stationery Shop of Tehran. There's just a whole wide range of books, and The Little Prince was one book that I loved reading. Someone gifted it to my daughter. It was lying, and at one point I was like, hey, I've run out of books. I need to order something else, but I don't want to break that flow. So I picked up that book, and it is such a beautiful book. I didn't realize like it's so applicable to adult life. It's actually not a book for kids, I think. Like
Okay.
kids may interpret it in a certain way, but I think every adult should read that book.
Little Princess.
It's called The Little Prince.
Little Prince.
It's
Okay.
by a French author, and it's a small book. A lot of illustrations and stuff, but it's
Okay.
so beautiful. Everyone, I think, should read it.
Okay.
I don't know if most people would be able to take the meaning, what was intended in that book. You need to be in a certain like space in your life to kind of actually
Yeah,
understand and
yeah.
relate to it, right? It's almost very satirically pushing adults to say, hey, what have you done in your life? Like,
Yeah.
why don't you live like a child?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's so much, you'll just be awed by life if you look at it from a different perspective, like how a child would look at it. And so
Fair
that's my
enough.
list of like 40 things. There's just a whole ton of
Wonderful.
things.
Wonderful. So we've come to the end of the podcast. One last question I have before we part ways is that what would your advice be to a young entrepreneur who wants to start and make it big in the F&B industry?
So firstly, I would say just really trust your gut. It will tell you what is the right thing to do. Like, don't go about trying to get validation from like a zillion people saying, hey, this is my plan. How should I do it? Because everybody will have an opinion on how you should be doing certain things.
Yeah.
You know best what works for you. Secondly, I think just take baby steps. Like, don't focus so much on the end goal that you're not able to figure out how to get there. Like, you're just so hyper focused on making things right there. Don't just enjoy what you're doing, because that's more important. You got into this business because you're passionate about it, right? Not because of what you want in the end out of it.
Yeah.
So don't ever forget, be actively involved in every aspect of the business that you're great at.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times when you have to admit that finance might not be your core strength. Then get somebody whom you trust to kind of look after that. Don't try to do everything all the time by yourself, because you'll just collapse at some point. You can't keep up, right? So bring on people who kind of match your synergies and who can add more value in certain sections of the business.
Yeah.
Trust them to do a job better than you, I think. And sometimes things don't work, and you should know when to close that door, cut it off. Don't be so attached to it that you just you just drown in that sorrow that things are not working. Like, move on. Like, there's always something else. If this is not meant for you, something else will be, right? Don't give up. Know when to shut this out, but know also how to move on in another direction.
Fair enough. I think we've had like a lovely conversation. I absolutely would happily do another hour. Maybe we should bring you back on the show sometime soon, because I think you have a lot to offer as a person.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the best with your 40 list that you're doing. You already striked off 36, so I don't think you would take a lot more time to finish it off. Thank you so much again for coming on to the show. Any parting thoughts from your end?
I think it was just great being here, and I'd love to have this conversation offline. There's so much more to chat.
100%.
But hopefully, some people who watch this will get some kind of a learning out of this, or some takeaway from this, and that'll help them change their life in some way.
Yeah. The takeaway is that give yourself a chance
Absolutely.
to do what you want to do. All right. Thank you, Swati. Thanks. You so much for coming over.
Pleasure.